Things are heating up here at Death of the Reader. We are Flex and Herds, bringing you your murder mystery world tour, discussing Naomi Hirahara's Sayonara Slam, which has got to be one of the catchiest titles we've had on the show thus far, Herds.
Despite having little to do with the actual mystery, yeah, it's great.
It's pretty great. We are discussing chapters 7 to 11 this week. And can I make a very frightening confession?
Always.
Perhaps the whitest that I've ever felt.
Always. Tell me, what is your confession? Step into my booth. Tell me. Confess your sins.
I thought that sayonara was like a Spanish word.
What? Why? Flex, come on. I'm supposed to be the uncultured one here who's always offending people. Are you trying to steal my bit? Is this what's happening? Come on now.
It was one of those things where when it was brought up in the novel for the first time, I was like, oh yeah, of course. Why did I forget that? Because I've definitely heard it before, but I guess just like, it's just been ingrained in my brain in this like different context that I don't know why.
The equivalent in Spanish is adios, which is also a great word, but not that similar to sayonara.
No, absolutely not. I wasn't like confusing the words. It just like, I guess because I always hear people say sayonara with like, you know, the country and western thing, I'd kind of associated it with that kind of era of media, and it kind of had tied, you know, Mexico and Spain into it, like by extension, but I don't know what happened there. Anyway, that's a tangent on a different matter entirely. This book, Herds, has gone up to another notch.
Yeah, it has. It's exploded. No pun intended there. This novel goes from cozy to slightly less cozy to like, how are we dealing with these issues? What is happening? Why is Mas being threatened by thugs in a backstreet?
You were saying last week that this book was like maybe targeted towards younger readers, like, you know, younger than 20 and something. And I was like, yeah, you know, that makes sense. And then we get into this part and it's like, and we're talking about the comfort women from the war. And the way that prisoners of war were abused. And it's like, oh my God.
Weird. This is the thing. The tone of this novel, for the most part, is very soft, right? Like, it is the sort of thing that I would read to my little grandchildren. But there are some chapters that I would have to skip over in their entirety and then just not finish the book. Mas Arai himself is such a cozy boy. And I can't help but feel that the way that it's written is such a strict extension of Naomi and her own personal experience, because she's the sort of author that I feel doesn't try to put on a voice, if that makes sense. She's not trying to like...
It's kind of a funny comment in the context of the very vocally written language in the book, but you're totally right.
But the narration is her. It's her. She's like speaking as the character in a sense. Mm-hmm. The tone of the novel is written from her perspective, but she also has all of this knowledge and all of this wisdom and understanding. And we've created this very strange... almost volatile concoction. And in that sense, I think it's actually a novel that is very, very helpful for understanding what it's like to age and to look back on it, your own personal experiences with a more like broad mind, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. And as definitely strange. Old people who are aged and elderly and can relate to this experience.
Look, I'm just trying to give some perspective, okay?
Yeah, but I think that you're very much right. I think that this book does a really good job of characterizing a group of characters who are immobile. You know, when we go and we talk about Mrs. Kim, when we look at Maz's experience as he's like constantly weighing up whether or not he can actually do something, and the way that he just hand waves things that would be so, so much a part of other mystery novels.
Oh my goodness.
It's just excellent.
My favorite scene in the entire book is the thug scene.
Oh yeah.
Because it's where we fully bring to the forefront the like political undertones. They become overtones. And also the way that the thugs like confront Mas. They're like, hey you, are you with Japan or America? And he's like, I mean, I guess like I was born in America, so I guess I'm with America. And they're like, no, you can't be with America because they're ruining everything. He's like, are they? I didn't know about that. Like, because in any other detective fiction, it would be, and then I use my psychological and like charismatic traits to win the thugs over to my side. Mars is just like answering very honestly, like, I guess I'm like with America, like, I'm not sure what you're asking, sir. Could you please repeat the question?
Yeah.
Like, it's just it's a very honest book, and it's not like trying to be honest. This is how Naomi writes. It's great.
No, and I think it's also great because the way that the political undertones were introduced there is in a pretty goofy scene. Like, it's a little bit threatening, but you can kind of feel that it's a safer scene because of the context of the novel.
Yeah.
But it is a bit of a threatening scene. And then when we get on later and we're talking with Tanji about his plans to go and become a politician, it's like,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this is where we're going.
It's a really nice way of abruptly stepping up the intensity of the novel without it feeling like you've been hit over the back of the head.
For sure.
You can kind of see it coming in the same way that Mars can, bouncing off your point there about it being very honest. Like, what you're getting in for. And as Mars starts to realize, like, oh, right, this is getting a bit above my pay grade. Oh, wait, I'm not getting paid anyway. You feel like the book is leading you effectively into its raising intensity.
We're following Mars and his, personal experience throughout this whole dilemma, even when he's getting involved with these, like, politicians and, like, nationalist societies, the Zainichi, like, there's all of these events and movements with huge implications for Japan and America working in the background, and Mars is just kind of dipping his toe in. But as you say, though, even in the most threatening scenes of this novel, I never feel like Mars's life is on the line. I never feel like he's actually going to, like, he's never gonna get seriously injured, mostly because he's too careful. He's like, can I actually make this run? Can I, hop over this fence or whatever? Like, probably not. Maybe I shouldn't do that then. Maybe I'll just play it safe, So I never feel like Mars is at threat of, like, any serious consequences. But you do, on the other hand, feel the consequences that he's already suffered and the life that he's already been through, right? I do appreciate the kind of broader cast of characters. So many characters that it's difficult to keep track of, honestly. I do particularly like Amika, who I know we brought up last week, as you were like, she's very, like, big and tough and scary, but she probably isn't the criminal. I don't know. There's something about, like, the energy that she brings to a given scene, kind of opposing Yuki that I admire. In particular there.
The one thing I do like about Amika's character is that she has a very powerful presence in a scene, but Naomi also seems to really enjoy knocking her down a peg, but in a way that never undermines her presence.
Yeah.
It kind of feels weird in the context of, I guess, many other stories to see it, but there's moments where Amika's, like, pulling, like, lint that's fallen onto her dress off the side of it, and it's like an aside in the scene. It's really basic, but I think that it kind of does well to make her less menacing for how present of a character she is.
Yeah, for sure. It really highlights that, like, attention to detail that she has. How, like, impeccable she's, like, trying to be.
Yeah.
I think it also hints a little bit that she's, like, putting on a bit of a, not like she's still a very, like, strong-willed person, but she's putting on a bit of a front because she is a part of the media circus.
Yeah.
And, like, trying to make it big in the journalistic side of things. It's partly why, actually, when, like, as we said last week, this is a story with baseball in it, but it's really more about the media and the journalism. And I always love reading about, especially because we're reading it, an author's perspective on how the newspaper reacts to a murder, how it's portrayed and what details are released and what details are kept secret. We're not really dealing with corruption per se, at least, not in a direct way so far, but seeing the way that these different caricatures of journalists run around and, are definitely avoiding, Mars's questions and each other's skepticism, because everybody is a suspect, even Yuki. I'm surprised you didn't suspect him at all last week, but Yuki,
I suspected Yuki last week, but once I realized it was Sherlock and Watson, I had to drop it. It was a bit too much of a stretch for me. But yeah, no, going on to the journalism aspect, I think that it does really nicely, and kind of connecting it back with Itai, who was a journalist. When we start speaking with, like, Tanji, for example, who is when I said last week that Sunny was the most suspicious character to the point it felt too obvious, Tanji, he's like, yes, and we shall restore the lost honor of Japan at any cost.
Yay.
And you're like, all right, okay, yep, here we go.
It's a bit much.
But
Yay, nationalism, I love it.
It was really interesting kind of having these scenes going back, not like directly, but comparing Amika and her journalism and her career and the struggles that she's had with Tanji, who's feels like he's had not like a free ride, but he feels like he's kind of cruising on existing success. And he's like, yes, and now that I am wealthy at baseball, I shall do politics because I am an expert.
Indeed.
It's like, well, are you really? Don't really back that one.
You just think you are, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of really great how this novel explores its themes, and I think particularly because of the close proximity with Tanji and his kind of nationalist rant to Amika and her kind of first really vulnerable scene in the novel where we start talking about Mrs. Kim.
Sure.
I think that those are really well placed to kind of show where the background ethics of the story diverge, that we can see that the strong, menacing Amika is putting up a front to do the right thing, whereas Tanji, the successful, cool guy who does the baseball, doesn't really have the best head on his shoulders. I think that those scenes really nicely play off each other. And were very well structured here.
Yeah, Naomi actually does a really good job as an author of pairing up her characters, having this X character be a foil to Y character who's a foil to Z character.
And not even necessarily in the same scene, which is like really clean.
Yeah, the actual character dynamics in this novel I think are really interesting. I almost wonder if it wasn't a murder mystery, if I'd have had an easier time when I went through for the first time through, just like enjoying the characters. I feel like it takes a couple of reads of this story to really appreciate the intricacies of the different characters and their relationships with each other.
I'd agree with the intricacies, but I think that if you go through with the mystery not necessarily in mind, the characterization still really sticks out in a nice way.
Yeah, for sure. There's a character who we haven't even mentioned at all in this discussion named Lloyd, who is Master's son-in-law. The most important character. And literally, he is the head groundskeeper at Dodger Stadium. I guess he's the whole reason that Masters is working there or is visiting there on the day of the murder.
Yeah.
But I couldn't even tell you what he does. He's so, like, inconsequential to the actual mystery. Maybe he's more prominent in the other books.
I think so. I think it's also thematically in this novel that he's indicative of what's happened to Mars's business in retirement, because Mars was a gardener and now his son-in-law, also ostensibly a gardener, is like serving one of the largest facilities in Los Angeles.
For sure. Can we give a shout out now that we're talking about like class and work? There is a scene that I think was actually in the early part of the story, but that's okay, where Mars is describing his job as a gardener, and he's talking about how there is like this one house, and it's the only garden that he actually looks after, and it legitimately, it's like 10 pages of just him describing the different ways that he wants to like fix up the garden. He's talking about how like, I'm going to arrange the rocks in this way and plant these trees here, and cut these weeds, and it's incredibly detailed.
I don't know if it's quite 10 pages, but it definitely sticks around.
It's like multiple pages of him just talking about his life as a gardener and the intricacies of the profession, and I love that we have time for that, but not enough time for Lloyd. But but we do have enough time to talk about Mas's like passion for gardening.
Yeah.
Which I love. It's definitely one of the highlights of the book.
I think that going back to what we were saying last week about it being very cozy, that despite the intensity ramping up, there's still a very heartwarming backseat to this. We haven't spent as much time with Genesee as I thought we would in this tale part, but when we're dealing with, some of the other former prisoners of war who are elderly and Mars's age, and when we're looking at Mars being like, oh my goodness, maybe I should just be honest with Genesee. It's like, yes, Mars!
It's beautiful.
It's just so heartwarming.
Maybe she'll just be in love. Maybe everybody will just love each other.
But, and my God, the thing we completely forgot to mention last week, which we should have, is that Yuki's grandmother was like Masa's school girlfriend back in
Oh my
Hiroshima or
goodness.
something like that.
Yeah, there's a whole love plot here. It's fascinating.
I don't think it plays into it that much, but that's kind of the kickoff for the Genesee thing. But going back to what we were talking about, pairing characters up.
Well, that's sort of how Yuki knows Mas, like how they get in touch. He's like, oh yeah, like you were friends with my grandma, weren't you? And he's like, oh, I was. And he's like ready to break in a romantic
So many
song.
years ago.
Exactly. It's gonna turn into a musical. Where's my Mas Arai musical?
It's got to happen.
But I mean, this is the ethos of this like whole novel. There's so much in this novel that is like framing devices and set dressing and just building out the edges, right? Like when you're putting together a 1,000 piece puzzle, except that 980 of those pieces are just the edges, right? Like it's building this beautiful frame, and it's like I love it. I love this as a change of pace from our regular novels. I don't know. I just want to clarify. Like, it is definitely not the kind of like I'd pick up on my own, but it's such an interesting change of pace, especially with an author who obviously has such vibrant like family history. Seeing her express that in such an honest way, I really appreciate it.
And I think, Herds, that appreciation can rest for a moment as the music plays and we prepare to throw the gauntlets of war down to fight over this mystery. You're listening to Death of the Reader. We are Flex and Herds discussing Naomi Hirahara's Sayonara Slam. We'll be back in just a second. Are you subscribed to Death of the Reader on any of your favorite podcast streaming platforms? Be sure to go there, subscribe, and leave us a rating so you can catch our full extended chat with Naomi Hirahara and our upcoming full chat with Stella Duffy on Money in the Morgue. You're listening to Death of the Reader. Flex and Herds here. Once again, the Murder Mystery World Tour, we are discussing Naomi Hirahara's Sayonara Slam, chapters 7 to 11. I am in the hot seat, and Herds, it is time to find out what my 2 points are for today. You've waited until this week to give them to me, so I got a double whammy to solve this week.
Yeah. All right, it's time to find out what all of the points are for. Now, this is a very straightforward question. Obviously, one of the points is just, can you solve the mystery, the who, the how, and the why? For your second point, this might be an easy point for you. This might be the hardest thing you've ever heard in your life, so get ready. We've met this like very large kind of cast of characters, it being an open circle mystery. And there is a reason why I've stopped this at chapter 11 here. There is a character somewhere in the cast who is secretly a Zainichi, which is a Korean Japanese person. I would like for you to pinpoint who in the cast you think is Zainichi. And for that you will earn a point, sir. I know it may be tricky. You'll have to sift through all of your notes to figure out who it is. I'm sure it'll take you a very long time to determine. But that is
it'll take me literally moments, sir. Literally moments. The question I have for you, Herds, and the thing I'm scared about, that maybe you're about to take the main mystery point away from me and put it on something else, is why does that matter? Because I mean, it's clearly Amika. She's the only character I can think of mentioned in the entire story speaking Korean, and it was in her introduction scene when they're like, oh, there's someone kind of mumbling in something weird. It sounds like it might be Korean, and Amika can clearly follow it. Like, that's no troubles there.
Interesting.
The thing I have...
Very good memory.
The thing I have an issue with here, Herds, is it's like, Why is it I need to figure that out? Are we about to unveil that there is some second mystery going on here with this story of the comfort women and the stories of prisoners of war?
The reason why I ask is because I think one of the kind of interesting aspects as we get into this story is that we're going to determine through Naomi's narration not just who is guilty but who is innocent. And Amika, like, she's blustering about quite all over the place. And have you completely taken her out of the equation of being the murder culprit?
Absolutely. I think that, particularly given that scene that we were talking about in the first part, where we basically juxtaposed her with an adjacent scene featuring Tanji and his vaguely nationalist ideals, I think that was very intentionally meant to show that Amika is a character with good intentions. And if you're saying to me that she's Zainichi, are you saying that she's actually here to try and maybe work with Itai to uncover what was going on with Japanese prisoners of war?
I would never confirm or deny anything. I'm just trying to get a beat on your feelings, because honestly, when I was reading this novel, I was, aware of this whole, Zainichi interesting angle that a character might have, and interested in why, they might try and hide that sort of thing. I'm just interested as to why you might suspect that that Amika was Zainichi. She has something to hide. Maybe if that were the case, Itai might have been trying to expose that, or expose something about her background.
Oh, right. So you're saying you're trying to throw me. So you've given me a point here, sir, to throw me off the scent.
I would never.
I see the play. I follow the game.
I would never.
I know what's. Oh,
I'm just curious.
You were about to get away with that crime there, so you were about to escape.
I am no criminal.
An unhanded culprit.
I'm a Watson, and Watsons cannot be the villain, I think.
Listen, Herds, listen. I mean, like, round of applause for the attempt. Round of applause for the attempt. But no, I think Amika is, if she's here trying to do some journalistic work and maybe trace her Korean roots, maybe that's what the entire thing with Miss Kim is. Maybe she's related. Maybe that's the entire shtick. Because I think that there are some other characters in this story who may or may not be related that may be important to the crime. If we also have other related characters who are doing slightly less murdery things, then that would be a nice, parallel to the thematic. A nice bit of clean writing by Naomi Hirahara, unlike your writing of this absurd...
Gambit?
This absurd attempt to throw me off the scent of Sunny Hirose.
I am the Watson here. I am not the Moriarty. Despite popular opinion, I've seen the fiction. I've seen the fan fiction. Look, I'm just saying, because honestly, when I was, flicking through this story, I was strongly suspicious of Amika.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of curious, you've kind of said, yeah, she has good intentions, and you pushed her aside, which is fine.
Well, let's unpack this a little bit, because I think that it's fair enough. Like, she is introduced as a very present character, which in a mystery novel is often going to be code for the villain, partially because murder mystery writers, as we've shown over the course of this show, have no original ideas under the sun.
It's true.
I say that with a tangible sense of irony. But I think that this is a case where she's being used effectively as a red herring. As I said, I still suspect Sunny very much for the same reasons, because I think the main thing for me is that Amika, she had opportunity, but she didn't have means. We have at no point really shown that she has access to cyanide, which was used to kill Itai. The closest we have is that she's clearly had some presence around hospitals, I think.
Maybe she has connections, who knows?
Yeah, but I don't think that's been foreshadowed as such.
You say that as though you're like, oh, it's Sunny because he had a jewelry store, therefore cyanide. You say that like that's any less of a flimsy connection.
The thing I'm pinning on Sunny here is, yes, that is totally flimsy. If Amika had the means to get access to how that poison was delivered to Itai, I would say that it was just as strong. But she was in the same journalism box as a bunch of water bottles that were handed out randomly. I do not think that is means. The access to poison thing is less significant there to me. Though I think it more is reinforcement of the point.
Do you want to jump into your accusation of Sunny Hirose now that we've had an additional 6 chapters? Is there any new information that has been brought to light that might aid you here?
The thing I'm confused about here, Herds, and
yeah,
this is challenging, and honestly, maybe what I kind of expected you to throw at me for the second point, in which case you would have had it, so you would have walked away with it. Is that I still can't figure out quite why Sunny did it.
But is that not part of the original point that you have to figure out the who, the how, and the why?
Well, I thought that you kind of double down on it just to scrounge an extra point away from me.
That's the original point. Let's see if we can get the why, sir.
The thing is I can comfortably say, because of our experiences talking when we first met him about prisoner of war camps, talking later on in the novel about the Gripsholm and the Teia, which are a couple of prisoner of war vessels that were used to cart Japanese American prisoners of war around and basically put them into manual labor camps. The difficult thing is I think from the discussion we had with Stinky, the implication is that Sunny is related to someone at a prisoner of war camp, and by Itai's interest in that, he was going to make public something about that, but I don't know what about that is going to lead someone to murder. Like, I don't understand. It just seems so flimsy, both as my own solution and as a mystery aspect, that, like, coming out and saying, like, oh, Sonny, this guy, he was part of a prisoner of war camp, and now he's going to kill someone because they're putting it in the newspaper? Like, what? What kind of a motive is that? My best guess, because we have to tie it some way to the rest of the thematics of the novel, is maybe somehow Sunny's relatives were, like, related to what happened to the comfort women, and that's why Amika is kind of put in there as a parallel and a red herring, because they both have ties to that. But I can't really see, like, any grounding for that. There's nothing that really says, like, yeah, there was this one guy that I knew who was involved, and then we're like, oh my god, it was Sunny all along. Like, there's nothing like that. Like, I don't know. I feel like I'm kind of talking myself in circles, because that's totally where I am.
I'm happy to watch you talk yourself in circles. It's fascinating trying to watch you puzzle out this particular aspect of the story.
Yeah, it's weird, because part of me wants to say that Naomi is about to commit a murder mystery sin.
Uh-huh.
That we are about to find out that Sunny was related to someone who did something, and Itai is gonna, like, publish a story about it or something, and he's like, I can't have my family honor tarnished, because that's, a traditionally Japanese position to take, because it's a very honor-driven society. But, like, I just... Either Naomi is about to unveil something that wasn't accessible to us, that the crime is committed through things that were not shown to the reader, classic murder mystery sin, or this motive is really flimsy, or I'm wrong. And I don't think it is the third.
I will give you a very small, teeny tiny hint, just based on my own personal experience with this, and that is that
all right,
when I completed this novel, when I got to the chapter in which the culprit and the method and the who and the why, when everything's revealed, I sat back and I said, all right, I'm going to have to go back through the book and find where that was actually hinted at. Like,
yeah.
Like, I didn't read this story particularly actively, which was definitely part of the problem. You're definitely, like, tackling it a lot more actively than I did. But even me, like, finishing the novel, I was like, oh, okay, like, that's the ending. Interesting. Time to figure everything out in post,
Here's what I'm going to do. Here's what I'm going to say for the sake of the show.
Tell me.
And I mean no disrespect to Naomi Hirahara when I say this. This is purely a strategic approach.
You're such a comfy writer.
That the true motivation has not been adequately foreshadowed. I think it has to do with Sunny's experiences in prisoners of war camp and his personal relation. Perhaps he is related to Itai, but I genuinely do not think that is present in the novel thus far. I think that may be a surprise reveal. Otherwise, I will stand by what I said last week, and that is my answer, sir, for my point.
Well, I guess we'll have to find out next time on Death of the Reader as to whether your answer has been correct or if you have been misled by my cunning ploys and my white noise tactics. As much as I love them.
You know what, Herds? If it turns out all along that it was Amika, I'm almost tempted to just give you the point that I would have gotten, because
wouldn't that be a play?
That would have been masterful, thoroughly devious.
We'll have to see. We'll have to see. Look, you were pretty generous when we did the backyard cricket story last time, but that's okay. You better, for the next book, whatever you pick, you better make it a tough one.
I promise, Herds, that there may be train puzzles.
Oh, good. That's, you know what? I take it back. You can have all the points as long as you don't give me any train puzzles.
Now that's strategy.
No. Give me an easy one.
All right, next week on this show, we are talking chapters 12 to 16, I believe, of this novel, rounding out this story, Sayonara Slam by Naomi Hirahara.
It's going to be a slam dunk.
Herds, I hope for the sake of Naomi's honor, that I am wrong, at least in my motivation. But we shall see.
We shall find out. All right, well, good luck. Flex, I'll see you next week on The Pitch on Death of the Reader.